There are two types of engineers at big tech companies. Those who write very detailed software design docs first, and those who build working proofs of concept first. One of these types of engineers is good. The other one spends a lot of time writing design docs. Yeah, I don't vibe with the design doc guy. I firmly believe, from my experience in big tech, and especially my experience in medium to small tech, that spending your time on a design doc for something you haven't tried to build yet is like trying to paint a house you haven't seen yet. It makes no sense at all. You need to know what you're doing before you do it. And I want to go in depth on what I mean here, why I love this tweet, and why I feel like I'm going mad when I see people say, yeah, real engineers start with a design doc. That's not engineering. That's, I don't even know what to call that. But I know what I can call. But do you know what you can call? Today's sponsor. God, transitions are hard.
Today's sponsor's a little bit different because these guys helped get my whole channel started. Prisma was core to the T3 stack experience. You might not have heard about them recently, but that's a better reason than ever to take a look at what they're doing, because Prisma Postgres is probably the only way I would use Postgres right now. Seriously, these guys are cooking. Why should you care about yet another Postgres provider? Well, this is one of the few that will actually scale with your business, especially if you're using serverless tools like Vercel or Netlify. Previously, you'd have to worry a lot about connection limits. I know I personally went to hell and back when I was trying to make ping work using a Heroku database. I moved over to using a proper RDS instance on AWS, and even then, I was running into connection limits all of the time. Started figuring out pooling and realized how chaotic it was to do. Even after spending weeks on it, I barely had it stable. With Prisma Postgres, it's literally just one click. Go to their dashboard, you sign in with GitHub, you hit deploy, and you now have a database that will scale with you. A huge part of why their DB scales so well is the edge connectivity and caching layer that they introduced. You don't actually have to hit Postgres when you're making a query if nothing has changed and that same query has been made in the past. This helps massively reduce the amount of work the database has to do. And more importantly, it means the user gets an answer faster, making a much better user experience. If you want a Postgres database that works great in our modern serverless environment, that scales incredibly well and is fairly priced while also being the fastest possible option, Prisma Postgres is going to be a really, really hard thing to beat. Oh, and if you want live updates and streaming, all built in too. You can call prisma.whatever.stream and get back a streamed response that will update when changes happen, instead of just getting the original data when you call it. If I was shipping Postgres right now, Prisma Postgres is where I would start. I recommend you give them a shot too. Thanks to Prisma for sponsoring. Check them out today at soidev.link/prismadb. I want to go in on this, but first, we got AJ here. AJ is a legend over at Datadog. So if you ever wondered where your $1 million Datadog bills are going, some amount of it is going into AJ's pocket. Helps justify Datadog's absurd pricing because AJ's actually a god, especially the serverless stuff, one of my favorite resources. Do you have a detailed design doc? Only a shitty POC? Then we'll ship your shitty POC. Thankfully, he knows better. That all said, I want to start with a story. See this view here? This is my dashboard on Twitch. When I'm streaming live, which I am now, fun fact, I record a lot of my videos live, this is the dashboard I use to keep track of what's going on. I can see who's subbed. I can see my chat. I can see how long I've been streaming for. This page is pretty complex. Not because any given element is, but because I can do this. And if I open here and click edit, okay, on the topic of shitty POCs, we didn't have a designer at the time. I designed this as a shitty POC and they haven't changed it since. It's been like 3 years, 5 years now. That's hilarious. Yeah, this lets me customize my dashboard. So if I want quick actions, I can do this and drop it. And now I have quick actions in the dashboard. Awesome, cool. As you see, it's not built for this resolution, nor is it built for Firefox. So I'm just gonna cancel, fix that, get back to my normal resolution, and we're back to where I normally am. See that laptop split update? The pain this has brought me was one of the 2 reasons I quit Twitch. So, what the hell happened here? This layout is an interesting thing to design around. So that layout uses a wonderful, painfully outdated library called React Mosaic. Specifically, it uses a fork of React Mosaic I and a few others maintained internally at Twitch. This library has an interesting way of defining a layout. The way it defines layouts is a binary tree. So let's start with a basic one. We have our first node, we'll call it node 1, and it has nothing in it. If this was our tree, then the layout would be one big node 1. But if instead node 1 had some properties, let's say node 1
has children. It can only have 2 children. So I'll draw those in a sec. But it has 2 other properties. Split direction. This can be vertical or horizontal. We'll say it's horizontal. And it has a split percentage. I think it's just literally just called percent. We'll say 50%. So this node has 2 children. We'll call these node 2 and node 3. This is a horizontal split with node 2 and 3, which means it looks like this. Cool. Node 2, node 3, layout split. Awesome. And now when I move this bar, you're not actually changing node 2 or 3. You're changing the percentage for this split here. And this can be nested infinitely. Node 2 could have 4 and 5 as a vertical split. 5 could be a horizontal split. You get the idea. This is a binary tree that can nest in all sorts of crazy ways. Okay, that's a funny message. I believe they call it a binary mosaic now. Beautiful. Thing I'm trying to showcase here being this data model isn't linear. It isn't flat. It is a nested layout where the location of things matters a lot. And the way that this layout was stored was my favorite way to store arbitrary data, local storage. So we would store this layout in local storage. And when you change it, it would update local storage. So when you refreshed, it would still be there. And it worked great. We used this method and this local storage backup for the shape of things to build the Twitch dashboard, to build mod view for Twitch, and also to build the ill-fated Twitch Studio, which was a really bad attempt at competing with OBS, the program I'm using right now to record, that I tried my best to save. Rough time, rougher team, some very rough individuals on that team. Not a good experience. A handful of the people on that team had a bad habit of spending all of their time in design docs and not actually writing fucking code. And that's why I'm convinced that all of them should have been fired. Let's go into what I mean here. There was a ticket on User Voice. User Voice is a platform for users upvoting what they think should be built. Twitch User Voice. And here's a bunch of different things that people have ideas for, and we can scroll through and see what people have voted on. As you see, a lot of these have a lot of votes. Like Keep Moments has 4,500 votes. There was a ticket with 5 votes for synchronizing the layout. So if you had multiple devices, the layout would be same on them. So if I had 2 computers, we'll say computer 1 and computer 2. The goal was to make it so if I made a change on one, that change would exist on the other. Sounds pretty useful, right? If we ignore the fact that it had 5 upvotes, intuitively it makes sense. This shouldn't just be local. This should be backed up on the server so that when you sign out and back in or switch computers, the value's still where it used to be. There's a slight problem here. We're assuming with this that these 2 computers are the same resolution. We'll say it's classic 1080p. The goal of this was to solve for multiple computers. What happens if those computers are different aspect ratios? What happens if instead of computer 2, this was iPad? iPad has a very different aspect ratio. Because of that, this layout might work great here. It would not work at all here because we are splitting by percentage, not by the number of pixels. We're not saying this needs 960 pixels of width. We're saying it needs 50% of the width. So if the width changes, your layout breaks. And if you want to see this in action, it's not even hard. Here is my chat layout. Here's my chat layout when I split this to 50%. Thankfully, I set this up in a way where it's actually still somewhat usable, but you can quickly see how this would not be usable on many different displays and setups. The proposal that was, I believe, between 7 and 20 pages was so focused on the data storing model that they forgot to actually think about what this would look like to use. The spec was planned to take 5 engineers about half a year to build a sync engine that would have made the user experience worse. They actually had written a proposal. A PM had spent months working with Eng leadership to write a proposal for a feature that would have made the product worse. The reason that engineering was convinced this had to take so much time was the non-flat nature here. Twitch uses GraphQL. GraphQL is a pretty solid way to define a schema for your backend and access it from the front end. It actually served Twitch's purposes quite well. The problem is you cannot query a binary tree through GraphQL because you don't know how deep to go in the query. If I write a GraphQL query that is in the format of query user, and this grabs user has friends have a name property, an ID property, whatever else. Yes, this is another GraphQL defense video, sorry. You can't go deeper than what you queried here. The depth here is user, like query, user value, which has a friend's key, which has name and ID. You can't go deeper than your query does. So if I wanted friends, name, ID, I can't go deeper unless I define it in the query. So if I want my friends, either I put it in here or I don't get it. What happens if we're querying these nodes though? So I change this to query layout. Layout has a node. The node has a split. It has a percentage, and it has nodes of its own that have these same things. This query would work perfectly fine for this here. But the moment we go one layer deeper, this stops working because we need to, in our query, in the code that we wrote to get the data from the backend, be as deeply nested as the response possibly can be. So how do we solve this problem? After far too much planning, conversations I was not involved in because I was working on other things at the time. If I had had any idea this shit was going on, I would have jumped in front and put it out way fucking earlier. Their solution was to have nodes that have split percentage, ID, type, parent. And now we will store all of the nodes in this new layout array, reconstruct it on the client, and also deconstruct it to store it on the server. I mean, sure, technically, it's a good interview problem. And you'll notice a theme here. Design docs feel less and less like actual work and more like interview problems. They managed to waste a lot of time designing this. And there are two things they never did. And this is a common problem I find with design docs. Design docs discourage you from talking to the people who actually know the solution to the problem. There were two groups of people that should have been consulted with that were not talked to at any point throughout this development. One is the users. Users were not talked to. If the PM in charge of this project had talked to creators and taken the time to figure out what they thought they were going to get from this feature to realize, oh, you want to have the same layout on your vertical monitor, on your laptop, and on your iPad, that's a different feature than we're building. Shit. Could have done that. They also could have talked to the GraphQL team. Because as many in chat have already figured out, the easy solution to storing an arbitrarily nested JSON blob in GraphQL is to store it as an arbitrarily nested JSON blob. Instead of storing it like this, node could have just been JSON payload. Hell, you don't even need node anymore. This is all the query would have needed to be. When I first got wind of this project and I saw the interesting architecture they had designed, not written, just designed it, over 2 months into the design, by the way, I asked, why can't we just do this? Why can't I store it as JSON? To which they responded very confidently, the GraphQL team would never let us do that. I decided to reach out. I had a good friend on the GraphQL team, one of the higher ups, funny enough. And when I reached out and talked to him, I went out of my way to present this without any biasing to the best of my ability. I presented the problem, I presented the data model, how we were storing it right now, told them that we want to sync this, to which Tony looked a little suspicious and said, why wouldn't you just store that as JSON? To which I smiled and said, because my team claimed your team wouldn't let us. To which Tony said, I don't know why you're the only front-end engineer that bothers to talk to me and the GraphQL team. I really wish more of them would. Yeah. So I managed to throw away 2 months of work with a single 15-minute call. And the reason I could do that is because I'd already built this twice. Since I built this for ModView, I already knew. And since I talked to people, instead of spending all my time in Google Docs pretending I'm a real engineer, I was able to fix this problem very quickly. Sadly, the product problem was not so easy to fix. The product problem was a fundamental misunderstanding that the PM had because said PM just didn't really understand Twitch, much less its creators yet. I ended up having a call. It was supposed to be 30 minutes. It went for 2 hours where I in-depth described this problem, to which the PM actually seemed like they were starting to get it. And they were really impressed that a random engineer on the team seemed to understand the users better than most of the other people in the org did. So, seemed like we were going to make real progress. Then Christmas break happened. And the fun thing about breaks is any work that was done before a break tends to be forgotten if it wasn't written down. And the problem was that our conversation which concluded the document was bad, did not result in the document being deleted. So not much long after, when we're back from break, we have the kickoff meeting for this doc. That has not changed at all since any of these things happened, by the way, because the things I did were practical and real, not docs. And this is the biggest problem with docs. Documents encourage persisting bad decisions. Once it is written down, it is really hard to delete. And if someone writes down something that is wrong, the only way to make sure that wrong thing doesn't keep happening is to cross it out in whatever fucking program they're using for it, use a strike through, and right underneath say, this was determined to be wrong, do not ever do this. When the kickoff meeting happened, I felt like I was going insane. Like all of the time I had just spent right before break vanished, and I had somehow imagined it. And we were about to dedicate 5+ engineers to 6+ months of work on a bad product with the wrong spec because no one had bothered to actually fucking try it. I got told in this meeting that my confidence that different computers often meant different aspect ratios was not something we had the data for yet. So in order for me to trump this doc, I would have to collect the data. Yes, I, the engineer, the only one who actually understood the users, was instructed to find data to prove the bad doc bad. If we had just built a prototype of this and put it in front of some users, all of this shit could have been stopped. All of these steps could have been skipped. Our users could have had a good product 3 months before the point we are at. But instead, I got effectively bullied into adding a bunch of tracking events to the Twitch dashboard to keep track of which aspect ratios a given user had using device IDing and the ratios. Turns out, for the average user that has more than one device ID, they also have more than one aspect ratio. I think less than 5% of people with 2 device IDs had the same aspect ratio on both devices, thereby proving this is not a feature, this is a regression. We were about to spend 6 months building a regression on the product. The really funny thing about all of this is in parallel, we were doing other work. The reason I was too busy to fix all this shit when it happened is I was assigned a different project. The thing I was working on was adding this responsive, customizable layout to Twitch Studio. The original plan was to spend similar months speccing out what this would look like for Twitch Studio. I said no. Another engineer on the team was excited by me saying no and joined me. And before we could be told, no, you need a doc, we had already built the whole thing in under a week. Since then, that team refers to it as the Theo method, because I guess, pioneered this idea of trying to build the complex thing to see how it works, see what the problems actually are, before writing this crazy doc that is all bad assumptions. And I want to be very, very clear. I am not against writing a doc. I think design docs for complex things are very, very valuable. Once you understand the complexity, the problem is when you're writing a design doc, when you don't know what the complexity is yet, you're going to be imagining complexity in all sorts of places that make no fucking sense. A video I've been dancing around doing for a while about one of these is a very interesting design decision on the dashboard that's caused numerous regressions. Quick actions. I'm not going to take the time to go really in depth on this one because it's just going to make me angry. These quick actions here do things. I can't even hit save because it's fucking layout. I have to go all the way out to save it. Cool. There we go. When I click run 1 minute ad break, you would probably assume if you're a React developer that this button has an on click that triggers the ad break because you're a normal person that would build a normal app and not design doc it first. These buttons all have 4 different states they can be in. Loading, ready, action, and done. When you click the button, it does not trigger the action. It changes the button state to action state. When it changes the button state to action state, there's a use effect in that auto runs. Weird, not good, but probably fine, right? Here's where the fun comes in. This layout is saved. The quick actions order is part of the layout that is saved. If I have an ad running and I resize this a pixel while the ad is running, a save fires, which saves this button in the action state. From that point forward, my dashboard is a bomb, and every time I refresh it, it goes off, triggering an ad. That one caused multiple massive events, multiple terrible, terrible issues, including ads running in the middle of big events like the League of Legends tournament. Because one of the moderators opened the dashboard and happened to have it in this bad state. And the best part was the engineer who was on call when this happened was also the engineer who designed it. And he insisted that his design doc proved that none of this was possible, and this had to have been the user clicking the button accidentally, because when we look at the logs, the event for the ad running was run the place that it would have been if they clicked. I took a closer look at the numbers, and that event ran 2 milliseconds after the page load finished. No user is clicking on a button within 1/10 of a frame. I ended up having to side with the ad team against my own team in this incident. Not fun. That was when my good faith with that team died, because my team was too busy writing design docs to fix actual user problems, and the ad team actually cared. How crazy is it that the advertising team was the team that actually gave a shit about solving these problems, not the team in charge of creator sentiment and experience? If you ever wonder why creators hate Twitch, maybe you're starting to get an idea why. So, yeah. These design docs result in a lot of bad decisions being persisted, because they are designing the thing, not building the thing. But if we were to build the thing, and then afterwards realize, oh, yeah, these edges aren't great, we should document those and then build it right, awesome. That's a really good thing. And I'm very much in favor of building in that way. I don't think that this team could ever have built something good. I genuinely don't think that in the state it was in when I joined it, that the creator team could possibly build something people actually liked. The team itself was fundamentally structured in a way that is opposing to writing good software. And the key piece in the middle of all of it was these circle jerky, useless fucking design docs. Write actual fucking software, please. I'm sorry. It's just, yeah. By the way, everything I just described happened in like a 2-month window, like the same 2-month window for all of this. I was going fucking mad at this point. Yeah. And this isn't meant to be a takedown on all of Twitch. This is just one horrible team. All the other teams I worked at Twitch did not work this way at all. Our design docs were the result of real explorations we did, building real products and putting them in front of real users. Almost every doc I was involved in at Twitch was written after we had built the prototype and put it in front of users. Please make sure you understand what your users want and what edge cases exist in the thing that you're building before you write a doc about it, because it is very easy to hallucinate complexity in your design docs. Things like building your own transformation for a binary tree. That's a really appealing thing to do in a design doc that isn't actually practical at all. Or inventing your own alternative to on-clicks in a dashboard. That's a really fun complexity to put in a design doc that is really, really bad in the real world. And if any of these projects had just started with an attempt to build the actual solution, Twitch users, Twitch creators, and good Twitch engineers would have went much less insane. All that doc can do is introduce complexity and persist bad decisions. I genuinely cannot fathom a way to write a design doc that isn't inherently destructive unless you've prototyped the fucking thing first. So please, if you're working at one of those companies that refuses to let you try to build the thing before you talk about it, do it anyways or quit. Everything else is mental illness. It's not real development. And the best part, I should have mentioned this before, the person who wrote the product spec for this, they're now an exec at Twitch. The person who did the non-on-click button was 2 levels higher than me when they did it, and they've gone up 2 more levels since. The engineer that I built that prototype from scratch with, where we built the whole layout system for Twitch Studio from scratch ourselves, is still fighting to get a promotion 5 years later. So there is one more purpose of these shitty, useless fucking docs. They get you promotions in toxic environments. You don't write a design doc because you care about design. You don't write a design doc because you care about your users. The only reason you start with a design doc is because you want a promotion. Do not fall for this shit. If you cannot prove out a prototype of your thing, you cannot write around that fact. And the people who do these types of things, the people I've experienced in my career who fuck up in these egregious ways, I keep a list now. I will never, ever, ever, for any reason, hire one of the people I've experienced this with ever again. Thankfully, that only makes up about 10 to 20% of the people I worked with at Twitch. There are some fucking awesome people that I miss dearly that I still talk to all the time over at Twitch. But just one of these bad people, one of these design doc, like infected dumbasses, can cause 5+ engineers months, if not years of misery, cause meaningful, terrible outages, and gaslight you endlessly in the process. And I can't blame the doc for all of this. It's not a doc, it's a type of person. But these types of people love to write Google Docs before writing a single line of code. And I don't think you should hire those people. To go back to the tweet that inspired this. There are two types of engineers at big tech. Ones who write actual software and ones who get promoted while holding back the quality of the software. And I will not entertain another thought. If you disagree with me, it's because you're on the wrong side of this. That's about it. And I am sorry to be that strong about this, but design doc first culture isn't real engineering. It is a mistake. And this is one good point, actually funny enough, from a Twitch staff. One that has taught me a lot that I think was really good about this. Some devs lean into design docs out of fear of getting stuck supporting a POC that they were forced to shove into production. The build versus plan balance works best when there's a good trust environment. Largely agree. The one thing I'll say is ask forgiveness, not permission. If you do want to do the design doc in order to keep you from maintaining some shitty POC, quietly build the POC. Don't let anyone else know about it. Do it on a personal laptop on separate infrastructure if you have to. Do not open Google Docs until you know how the thing works. That's a hard rule that I'm fully confident, if not followed, will result in bad software. No, Orville, you don't do this because you don't know what the interfaces and high-level behavior are until you've actually tried implementing it. I have never worked on a project where I thought I knew these things ahead of time and I was fucking right. And every engineer who says they were right about these things writes shit software. Software needs to respond to reality. The whole point of software is that it is written to solve real needs. If the software solves the software and the doc writes how that happens, you're so far removed from reality that you'll never write good software. I'm saying build something first, document if you need to, ship if you don't. It's a really simple equation. Here's how you actually build good software. Start with a prototype, you try it. If it's bad, rebuild. If it's good, awesome. Analyze the complexity. If it's low complexity, analyze the POC. If it's good enough, ship it. If it's not, rebuild with new knowledge. Also of note, if you're on one of those teams working at one of those companies where they will ship it even if the answer here is no, hide the prototype. Don't let them know it exists or intentionally put things in it that keep them from being able to ship it. Find some way, if you don't want this to ship, if you know it shouldn't ship, find some way to sabotage it. Sabotaging software is a lot easier than writing software. I know that much from experience. It's not that hard to prevent the thing from shipping. Don't use that as an excuse to start with a design doc. It makes no sense to start here. And I don't know how anyone can look at their software architecture process, look at this and be like, yeah, I'm going to throw away all of this. That's not software development. That's mental illness. And I will not sit here and pretend that it makes sense sometimes. It doesn't. I don't care. It never makes sense to build software that way. The only time it might even kind of make sense is if you've already effectively done this part because you built the thing elsewhere already. Like if I was building yet another local sync engine, I've done that enough times that I might not need a prototype, but I might need to spec it out a little bit to make sure whoever ends up working on it with me doesn't screw up. Realistically speaking, I would still probably build it because it will guide the design doc so much better. And you won't end up going down rabbit holes that don't make sense. You'll end up focusing the design doc on the rabbit holes you already went down. If engineers were good enough at knowing which paths were complex, they'd be politicians, not engineers. Engineers are really bad at this. That's why we're engineers. We like fixing things when we break them. We are not good at guessing where the complexity is on a system ahead of time. Stop pretending you are. You're not. If you think you are, you're even worse at it than average. Write the thing, then write the doc, then fix and ship the thing. And in reality, what you're going to figure out is you'll probably be quite surprised how often the POC is actually good enough. Because it very often is. That's all I have to say. If you want to make a lot of money and you don't actually like software, go ahead and be this. You'll make a lot of money and I'll never respect you. If you want to actually write good software, please be this person. There is no other option. I won't pretend that there is. Anyways, that's all I got on this one. Let me know what you guys think. Hopefully you're the right type of engineer or you're going to work on fixing it. Until next time, throw away those awful design docs.